Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first space, our first Twitter Spaces in a while. Probably will be the first of a series of weekly spaces, we hope. Today with us, we have Alexis, our Chief Operating Officer, who'll be getting ready to speak soon. Today, we're talking about the recent victory in Geneva about the right to digital integrity incorporated into the Constitution. And that's a pretty big deal for NIM as well. Maybe let me introduce myself first. My name is Diane. I'm the social media manager for NIM. So I mostly run Twitter. If you've been following our Twitter for a while, you've probably been seeing my posts and everything. It's nice to meet you guys in person. I'll be doing more of these spaces from now on, and hopefully like once a week. If you guys are interested to ever join the space, please let me know. Just send a DM to NIM's Twitter account right here. Could be interesting. Today, we're going to be talking about the recent victory in Geneva, the right to digital integrity finally being incorporated into the Constitution after a vote. Our guest is Alexis Roussel today. He's the COO of NIM, Chief Operating Officer, and he's someone who's like key to today's spaces in terms of topic that we're doing. So we're seeing the right to digital integrity being finally incorporated into the Constitution. Victory in Geneva last week. There was a proposal up for vote on the 18th of June 2023. So that was last Saturday. And basically what happened is that a constitutional law was submitted to the Geneva Grand Council, and that proposed the introduction of a new article in the Constitution recognizing the right to digital integrity. So this was the first time the concept of digital life appeared in the Constitution. And actually, a lot of people, 94% of voters in Geneva, voted for protecting the individual against abusive data processing and for the right to an offline life. So the right to digital integrity is now being incorporated into the Constitution on the canton of Geneva, Switzerland. And that might also be the case for more cantons in the future, which is something we're going to get into very soon. We also have Sudo here today, head of community, and he was supposed to join this space as well and help me out in talking with Alexis, but he's unable to make it, so he'll just be a listener. And thank you also for my other colleagues right here supporting the spaces. We finally got our speaker, Alexis. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Can you, Alexis, explain what digital integrity is, and can you introduce some of your work around it, because you have done a lot of things for the tent around digital integrity?
Yeah, very simply put, you already in our fundamental rights. So as human beings, in modern democracies, we have what is called fundamental rights, and they are written either in constitutions or either in charters of fundamental rights. And there you have the right to life, the right to dignity, and associated to this, you have the right to your integrity. And this right to integrity is precised with right to your physical integrity and your mental integrity. So the government is not allowed to hit you and harm your physical integrity, or is not allowed to brainwash you and harm your mental integrity. And so what I was proposing since some time is that the government should not also be allowed to harm your digital integrity. That means that by collecting your data or manipulating the data in a certain way, or forcing you into some kind of digital relationship that you don't understand, they could be harming you. So adding the right to digital integrity at this level is actually something much more wider and stronger than just data protection or data privacy, but we'll talk about this. So adding the right to digital integrity to the same level as the right to physical integrity and mental integrity, it basically forces the government to think of you as a human being also in the digital space, rather than just data, that they can do anything with it that they believe is okay for the government. Instead, they have to treat this data in a way that protects your ability to be a citizen, take your own decisions, and vote freely. So, for example, Cambridge Analytica. Many of you know the story about Cambridge Analytica. It was clearly a harm on your digital integrity, because by modifying your space around you, so by modifying your Facebook feed in this case, they were inducing some changes in your mental state. So and basically changing your ability to take your own decision and vote a certain way, just by touching your digital environment around you. So in a nutshell, digital integrity is an extension of your physical and mental integrity, which is protected at a very, very high level in the constitutions or in fundamental rights.
Thank you. And you also co-wrote named Our Precious Digital Integrity. when did you get in digital integrity, and how did you start to look around the space and militate for this kind of right?
So 10 years ago, a bit more than 10 years ago, I was tasked with a group of friends in Geneva to write a political program. And that's always a interesting task. So you have to write a program for a political party. And this was at that time already the Pirate Party. And we were supposed to write, we did write a comprehensive program that would talk about how we view things that the government should do, like about education, about health, about infrastructure, about many things. And while we were doing this work, I was at the same time, because I'm a lawyer by education, I was trying to find a way to get the digital part in the fundamental rights in a correct way. And I was always worried that the way the digital part of a life is being protected until now is too complicated through laws like the GDPR, or at that time data protection laws. And it's too complicated, it's very technical, and especially the burden of proof is on the wrong side. Basically, I never felt okay with the fact that if you are threatened on your data, or you feel threatened on data, to you to prove that the person on the other side, either the government or a company, is actually mistreating your data or misbehaving with your data, then you have to spend a lot of time and effort to actually find out how they are collecting your data, how they are treating the data. And then you have to bring proof to a judge. And this is what Max Schrems did actually with the first Facebook case. So he spent 2 years just doing this. And I felt it was not okay for a normal citizen just to spend two years just to fight for one database. So I have my own small story in Switzerland. There was a company who was making this credit score. It still exists. And basically we try to use the law in our favor to try to fight against this company. But again, we had to prove it was a very cumbersome effort to go and ask this company where the data is, how it is treated. And basically we had to also send more data. We had to send a copy of our ID to this company to prove that we were owner of this data. And basically I had to give more data to the company in order to get my data off, which didn't make sense. So how do we reverse it? And so while we were discussing this program, and suddenly at one point we said, okay, well, yeah, let's put digital here at a very high level in the constitution of Switzerland, where the fundamental rights is there. And the first time we did this, everyone in the room, 3 or 4 people in the room, were like, yeah, that sounds good. But but we continued without seeing it. And then with time, it just kept on coming into the discussion and started to grow to the point that I was using this during my political debates, or even when I went to the radio, television in Switzerland. I was using this word, this expression, and I was using the ideas that were coming up there. And I was seeing that it was always giving me an approach which was a bit different than the others, and people were responding positively about it. So at one point, I decided to put this in a book, and we wrote with my friend Grégoire. We went, who's a journalist, and we actually spent a long time, 2 years, to actually write that book and to put basically the ideas on paper so we can trigger some deeper discussion. This is basically what happened, because at the same time we were able to organize the first university conference in Neuchâtel, where I convinced basically a teacher of constitutional law that this was an interesting subject. And he, at the beginning, he was condemned. At one point, he said, "Okay, yeah, let's do a debate on this, or a colloquium." And at the same time, another person which I met also, which is called Johann Rochelle, started to. He's a university researcher in Zurich, but at the same time, he is part of a constitutional process in Valais, which is one of the cantons. And basically, he was elected there, and he started to use this. He proposed this in Valais, and suddenly the reaction of people was very positive. So there was small events like this which started to come together by me just talking to people and basically giving a concept that they were able to reuse, and that was bringing some positive aspects within the world of the digital space, because until now digital was seen as something very technical, always very technical, and you had to be very technical to be able to defend yourself. And normal people would say, I can't do anything, I don't have the competencies, it's already lost, cannot do anything, because what they ask me to do is too complicated. And I know the laws about digital data protection are too complicated, people don't understand. So suddenly here, if you say, well, we're just trying to protect you also in a digital way, because I mean, if someone is touching your data, it harms you, or it could harm you. Something as simple as this, people understand and say, oh yeah, indeed, that's interesting. Yeah, it went from this work on the program. We used it a lot of time to make, when I was writing articles and giving opinions in Swiss politics, I was using this logic, and every time people were responding very positively. So with time, some people picked it up, and then it came in Valais through the within the legal system. It started to get used to get into this constitutional process.
Wow, that sounds like a really long and interesting journey. You've been at it for a very long time, but you're now an expert in digital integrity, so that's great. And actually, I was just reading a amendment proposed by the constitutional law, and it talks about how the fundamental right is aimed to protect the digital integrity of citizens, but mainly in the context of their relations with the public administrations. So basically, if I was a citizen of Geneva now, and after this new amendment passed, what changes for me? What can I do if I want to change the way that my data is being used online? Will it be in a new form of a disclaimer, like do you accept these cookies or not? I have the choice to like not accept, or can I actually like?
So not yet. So it's a long process, and so just you and indeed, like you said, this is the right to digital integrity is set into a constitution, and a constitution is only a textbook it's a rules. These are rules written by the citizens to tell how the state should behave. Me, when I'm interacting with my state, have to respect certain rules. These are written in the constitutions. These rules normally do not affect directly private to private actions. So if I talk to you, I don't have to follow what is in the constitution. And if I talk to a company, or I go into talk to a company, what is in the constitution normally doesn't affect them. So it's really the relation between the person and the government. But what was happening before us, just the state of art before that? Until now, we had laws about data protection, and we will keep those laws. These are important, or the GDPR. These laws, they apply both to the private sector and also the government normally. And these laws basically were, if you look at the details, a lot of the government activities were excluded of these laws. All the security space, when there is an article in GDPR that says if anything touches security, GDPR doesn't apply. And for us who are in crypto space, the financial laws in the world basically also exclude data protection. As soon as you read the laws of finance, it says the financial intermediaries, the bank, have to keep data for 10 years in Switzerland, in the case of Switzerland, so which is way above what the GDPR would accept. And then you have the system where basically the governments also are using tools which are coming from the private. They have this really weird relationship with the private sector where they will use tools. For example, in the school of my kids, they are using Office 360 to provide the email Outlook, right? So they're forcing the kids who have no knowledge about what is happening behind the scene to use online tools, which creates profiles on them in the background and are being shared probably in the social networks databases, the profiling which is done by Outlook behind. So the idea is that if you put this in the constitution, then it forces the institutions who are abiding to that constitution to be more careful on your data. And so in this case, it's only the Geneva people towards the Geneva government, but it allows them to go in front of the tribunal and say, well, this administration, let's say some kind of social, for example, social administration, or even the local police, you could, if you would be in a lawsuit with them, you could say, hey, that does the fact that you were holding data, you as police, you as social department inside the government, if you are holding data on me, are you respecting my digital integrity? So it's really in the relationship with the government. But then what is interesting is that because the government any government in the world cannot do everything by himself, right? He has to work partners. He has to make public tenders. And in these public tenders, he asks some private companies to do some part of the job. So, for example, if you create roads, the government has to manage all the roads of the land, but they do hire private companies to build the roads, right? So in the IT side, it's a bit the same. You make a public tender and you would get a company to run some services, to run email services, to run websites, to run a certain number of stuff, which actually interacts with the citizens. And here, basically, today, the government, they just give everything. A lot of governments give everything to Microsoft, or even worse, to companies like Palantir, right? So Palantir in the UK wants to handle all the health data. They're coming and they're making an offer to manage all the health data of the NHS. And they say, we are making a very cheap offer, which everything will give you a great deal. But in reality, what they're doing, they're getting the grip on the data, and they're using this data to improve their own models and to resell basically this data elsewhere. So right now, the governments are implicit to this. And here, basically, what we're doing, we're giving them a chance to stop being part of this surveillance system, this smart surveillance system, by saying, hey, you as a government, you have a rule which is higher. It's protect the digital integrity of the people, so you have to protect the autonomy, which means that in every public tender that you are going to do now, you have to impose that the services will respect this. So because when a private company is working for the government, he has to follow the rules of the government. I give you another example just to make sure people understand is that if I'm doing prisoners transport, right? So the Constitution says that the government should protect the physical integrity of the person. So that means no one from the government as a government has the right to hit someone else. And so when in many places, and Switzerland also, the transport of prisoners, for example, is now done by private companies. But those companies are not allowed to hit people either because they have to follow the rules of the government, which means that if they would start hitting people, the government themselves would say, no, that's not allowed. If that rule was not in the Constitution, then the individual people would have to claim directly to the individual who is hitting them rather than having the government saying, oh, that's not allowed. So the government is binded also with this respect of your physical and your digital integrity. So there is this side effect that will come with time where a government who understand well what digital integrity is will have to impose this to all the companies who are interfacing and working with them to provide public services.
All right, thank you. So we talked about like public services as well as private services. Actually, I'm quite curious, how does education fit into this? Like schools, whether they or private, does this right also apply to students, or is it just for 18 or above? Because you mentioned the school that you go to use the office and collect data as well. So does it change anything over there in that sector as well?
So not directly. It will take some time, of course, because people are used to those tools. They don't believe that there's a problem. Most of them, they need to spend some reality. So the realities of Switzerland are twofold right now that we see, and where I think we will see the fastest effect. So one is by listening to the debate of the Geneva Constitution or Geneva Parliament debate, there is one direct impact that they see instantly, which is what they called, and I like this, the right for an offline life. And the right for an offline life means for them, as a very practical thing, that if there is an administrative procedure that you can go to, right? You go to an administration and you have to request something. Let's say you request a cultural brand, or you request a paper that they need to prove that you are living here. I don't know, something which is that the local administration has to provide to you as a service. Then they have to guarantee you by the Constitution that you always have a physical way to do this. You always have a non-technological way to engage with the administration. And in some other canton in Switzerland, actually they are preparing now laws which says that you can do digital only services, right? Where basically if you don't have a device, if you don't have a computer, if you don't have a phone, you cannot get the public service for you. So here that was one very easy case to see what kind of impact that people were foreseeing. And then the other element which is important in Switzerland right now is you have a lot of hacks happening. So a lot of public administration, cities, police, tax department, I don't know, there's a bunch of administrations, and all of them are getting hacked one after another. And the data are being leaked outside because, of course, the Swiss authorities, they don't pay the ransomware. So that data gets leaked after a couple of weeks of negotiation. They keep on continuing this. So you have after leaks. And people start to realize there's a problem there. So what I hope is that with those leaks happening, the people who are going to sue, because there will be consequences of those data leaking, people will start using the argument of saying, well, you didn't protect my digital integrity by letting this data leak. Right now in Switzerland, whenever there's a leak, no one is responsible. We are trying to find the hacker because he's the bad guy who put the ransomware and then leaked the data on, somewhere on the internet. It's true. We have to try to get this guy. But at the same time, did we do something wrong? Did we collect too much data? Did we have someone who took a decision which was wrong because we didn't secure these data enough? And now that is a debate that can start in the courts. So these are the two things which are going to happen, I hope, pretty soon. It will take time. In the school, it will at one point or so, in that example, it will also at one point hopefully come. But now we are facing another situation, which is about general education of people, where they say, well, what alternative do we have? And a lot of people think there is no alternative to Microsoft Office 360. They generally believe so because they live in an environment where they only see this around them. So they don't know there's alternative solutions. They don't know there's even other ways of doing things. And so that will take time. But I hope with those two practical examples that are closer to Switzerland, this is where we will see some actions, hopefully in the coming months or years.
I see. Okay, that's very interesting. And actually, there are other cantons, right? That are following the trend of Valais and Geneva. So Neuchâtel is one of them, the home of name, actually. And you mentioned that the right to digital integrity over there is being advanced even further to include the right to not be monitored, analyze, and measure.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on what this involves more, how it extends the right to digital integrity in those cantons?
Yeah, so first I want to explain a little bit how the work between the cantons works, because it's really interesting. First started off, I said, in Valais, where you have this work in the constitution that is being done. And why they took it, because we have a really interesting event which is happening in Valais, is that they're redoing the whole machine. So they've been talking for like 2 years or 3 years now about making their new constitutions. They were looking at all these new fundamental rights or new things to put in the constitution. So they tried out a lot of things, like animal rights and climate rights or whatever. I mean, a lot environmental rights, but a lot of things. They took some, they discarded some, and they had the chance to debate on the digital integrity. And then they started inventing other elements that goes with it. So they didn't say offline life, but they mentioned something similar. So they have this right of like having a non-technological relationship with the government. It's in there. And at one point they say, yeah, it's interesting. Let's also have this right not to be surveilled, monitored, and analyzed. This was discussed in the commission, and then it was refused by one vote. Well, it stayed there for some time as just a small paper somewhere on the website of the Valais government that this small group of people had talked about this right. And then there was the work in Geneva. It was very good. It went much faster. And because it was just focusing on the right to digital integrity and some sub-right, they could actually implement it and vote it last week. It went past the Valais one. So the Valais one is going to be voted on next year, because now they have a consensus on most of the constitution, and the vote it will be done in 2024, so it will go there. And then we had people in the local parliaments of Vaud, Jura, and Neuchâtel who actually also submitted the proposal locally. I had the chance to work a bit with the person who did this in Neuchâtel, and so we refined a little bit more, and we put back this right not to be surveilled. And what is interesting with the right not to be surveilled or analyzed and monitored is basically it's a bit more explicit. It's a way to say to the government that the way we think you should protect our digital integrity is by not collecting data at the first place. Right? So right now I think it's a myth that exists in most of the governments that they need a lot of personal data to make public policy, make it more precise. To make policies, you need data, obviously, but they think that they need a lot of public personal data. And I think this is wrong. I think that they don't need public data, public information. Knowing what is happening in the country, of course, is important, but they shouldn't need personal data. And so this is where the Constitution would propose to be more precise and say, well, actually, if you want to surveil someone, it has to be an exception. It has to be like if the police wants to observe someone because the police thinks it is criminal, fine, we can make an exception law and we can try and then they could track him and see if the person and try to catch him if he's a criminal. And that's totally fine. But last 20 years, the governments have been collecting so much data by accident, sometimes just because the systems were lower to collect the data. Sometimes they were collecting also on purpose, but they were collecting so much data that now what they can do, they can analyze all of this data and try to find patterns and try to preventively find criminals or preventively try to influence how people behave to try and micromanage the society. And I think this is also what happened in COVID. Whatever you think about, is it was wrong or bad public policy, what we could see is that they went down to the level of the individuals to tell them what they were allowed and not to do with very specific rules, right? Up to the point in some countries where you had to have a personal authorization to go out of your home, and this was delivered electronically, or you needed an app. So the fact that the government was able to micromanage every individual, they thought it was going to help them. But I think it just created a lot of confusion to most of the people. And the rules in COVID that worked were the main rules. So if you just say to someone, to a whole country, hey, for a couple of weeks you stay at home because there's a pandemic, actually most of the people will stay at home. That's fine because they understand the general rule. But the fact trying to, with apps and do tracing and go into the details of giving authorization to people, that is where it creates a lot of friction. So basically the right not to be surveilled, monitored and analyzed is a way of saying, well, if you are a government and you truly respect the right to digital integrity, you should actually give the people a way to protect themselves. You should not take their data, and also not feed this data into private companies, because this is what they're doing right now. And by not having the data, this is how you ensure the most security of the people, basically. Because then you have to promote tools also that helps to do this. And what kind of tools do you promote? You promote open source tools. You promote self-hosted solutions like Apple. You promote peer-to-peer tools. You promote cryptography and multi-party computing systems where people can prove how the data is being executed or treated. So, and this is basically a lot what we build right now in the crypto space and part of the crypto space. So the right to not to be surveilled is like a more precise way of defining what the right to digital integrity is one of the, and then the consequence of this would be something that we are talking from time to time in our environment, in our communities, is the right to use cryptography. That will create a natural link to why we need a right to use cryptography.
Amazing. Thanks for your very good elaboration on this. And you actually also argue that the right not to be surveilled is something that the GDPR currently fails to do, that it does not manage to protect fundamental rights or challenge the underlying principles of the surveillance economy, and that General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is currently the best regulation in the EU law. How do you see the data protection landscape in the EU change in the future? And do you think it's likely to go towards a similar approach than Switzerland?
It's a very good question. So there is a woman called Lizine Dardanian. She is a researcher at the University of Holland in Czech Republic. And she made a research paper on how the right to digital integrity is a new manifestation of the human dignity. She used this to make a critic on the GDPR. Basically what she said, which is super interesting, she says, well, GDPR has been designed, I mean, she's not the only one to say this, but GDPR has been designed as a market tool, as a market regulation tool. So it accepts the fact that there is a market of data, that there is a personal data market, and it doesn't try to change that. It tries to put more control, more power on the side of the individuals who are producing the data subject, which is what we use as a term, by introducing more consent. That's a big change of GDPR compared to the previous data protection law. Is the notion of consent that appears much stronger, but it doesn't touch the markets, right? And then it actually reuses a lot of the systems that the financial markets have. So the regulation that is being imposed and the way fines are working, they copy-paste a lot of things from the financial market regulation. And just for you to know that the financial market regulations, like, for example, the AML, the anti-money laundering laws, it is known that it has an efficiency of 0.1%. So basically, these laws are totally useless, practical. They're nice to have. They're like, okay, we don't want to finance them. Yes, we socially agree that it's not good. But the way we do it right now is basically with a 0.1% efficiency. And the way GDPR is tackling is a bit roughly the same. She's making a critic saying, well, that GDPR is failing to, well, it's not the objective of GDPR to go against the market. And what the right to digital integrity allows is actually to government to not participate in the market and to the market. So, and why that? Because When you talk about the right to digital integrity and you make the relationship to physical integrity, what it means in a legal sense, it means that your data is treated like your body, like a body part. If it's treated like your body part, it's part of your person, and it has some inalienable rights associated to it. So what are inalienable rights? These are rights that you cannot sell. You cannot be deprocessed from those rights. So let's say someone is collecting data from you right now in a lot of places, and especially in the US, they will treat your data as a commodity, as an object that they can take, they can buy, they can resell, that they can change, and they can feed it back to you and to manipulate you. Once you gave your consent, then basically you have no more chances against it. There is so in the case, so that's in one side of the world where data is a commodity. In another side of the world, which is mostly the Chinese side of the world, data is seen as a public good, which is a bit different. Public good is owned by, it is still data, but it's owned by the society, and the government is responsible and should be in control of this data. So you are, again, deprocessed of your data, and the data is being used by the society for the greater good. But the greater good might not be your individual good, right? This is how the social scoring in China is being developed, because in total, people agree in China that it helps them to benefit from the social, for the common good, but not for the to the detriment of some individuals. But they're kind of okay with this. And in Europe, I think that both models don't work. What is interesting with the right to digital integrity is that then we can say, well, this is not either a commodity, neither a public good. It's part of yourself. And if it's part of yourself, you need to respect it, and you shouldn't, just collecting the data is already a crime against the person. Just the fact that you are getting a data without consent, or even with consent in certain ways, is actually harming the person. And also good news for the people in the audience is that basically we will be presenting these thesis together with Luzine at the HCPP in Prague at the Paralympics in or 30th of September or 1st of October this year.
That's amazing. I actually have to ask you for more details about that later on. So yeah, it just shows how differently data is treated around the world, and that's something that's really unbelievable, but then it's the way that it is. So I imagine that digital integrity now being the same as physical integrity. Would you say that later on there could be something such as data trafficking, which would be illegal, such as organ trafficking now? Would it be the way that it would be treated once this is like completely implemented?
So that's my goal. Yeah, that's my goal. So my utopia is we kill the data market, the personal data market. Companies like Palantir and such companies, people should face consequences, right? Because what they do is harming individuals. And yes, this is a way. I mean, this is a topic that we've been discussing a long time already, which is digital slavery. We should break out of this digital slavery, and I think this is one of the ways.
Right, I really understand, and I think there should be more awareness, and I hope we can do more of this at NIM, and we're definitely going to the right direction. You were recently in Brussels, right? Speaking at the Computers, Privacy and Data Protection Conference, CPDP. Was there anything there that was mentioned concerning this, how this will change around the world? And could you give us like a little bit of a recap of what happened there and what the overall sentiment was?
So we organized a panel with, and there was someone from there was recently Vavanian, so the woman I told you who made this. There was the person from the Geneva government legal department who actually wrote the law in Geneva, or maybe he participated, but he worked up on this. Myself, and there was Harry Halpern, the CEO of NIM, to talk about the technical ways that we are seeing change. So we made a panel on digital integrity. So it was still small. It's still a small side thing. People are starting to understand. I think the vote in Geneva last week, where suddenly this topic is voted and there's 94% approval rate on it, suddenly people are kind of waking up, because I was realizing that in the sector of data protection, people have great minds, but they were kind of locked into some logic. They were focusing too much on purely privacy, maybe. And so we made an article recently in the NIM blog to try to interpret the vote in Geneva in a way that we can talk about data protection without talking about just privacy, but be a bit larger. And I think people responded positively to that because they voted with a very high level. So that's what we were trying to bring. And on the technical side, what we were trying to bring also, which is interesting, is that so NIM, how it works, NIM is a mixnet which provides network layer anonymity. And we believe that if we have network layer anonymity, then we can have better, I wouldn't say true, but or much better private communication, because private communication is not just about the message, encrypting the message, is also hiding who is talking to who. So basically on a transparent network, which is a TCP/IP network where you can see everything, you create an anonymity layer. And in this anonymity layer, you can create private transactions or private communications. And I think the right to digital integrity does the same thing somehow, is that in a society which is built on transparent communication tools, if you want to allow people to have their right to privacy respected, you need a right to anonymity. And the right to anonymity is a way to preserve your digital, and you need that because this is to preserve your digital integrity. So you need this construction from the right to digital integrity will allow you to have a right to anonymity, which will give you the tools to have your right to privacy respected. What we tried in Brussels to show, and I hope that it's going to be developed like this, is there is now an alignment between how we see technology and how we see the rights or the law structure. And that makes it powerful, because until now, we were trying to protect privacy of people in the context of a data market that was anyway using all the data all the time of everyone. And that doesn't work. And at the same time, you have people at the government who will say, yes, I respect your privacy, but I want to put cameras and sensors everywhere to surveil everyone, in case there is some terrorist or to find some other criminals. So, and these were paradoxes that couldn't be solved. Now, I think we have a good alignment between the theory of data protection, maybe a new theory of data protection, and also how data can be actually protected online through cryptography and through tools of anonymity.
I see. That's interesting. Yeah, that there was actually a lot of governmental figures as well at the CPDP conference. And you're right, there is a paradox about this. And you actually wrote about it in your recent article on digital integrity, right after the conference that was shared on our Twitter. And I'll probably share more on this space. We have to wrap up soon, unfortunately, because the time is passing and it's evening now, probably most of us. So yeah, just one last question on a personal level. How do you feel about the first win, the beginning of this journey? We should say
it's great, because I wasn't expecting that kind of level of yes vote in the capital of Geneva. 94% is huge. There is even one village who got 100%. The people called me from that village. Someone called me from the village saying that was like unheard of, right? It's a small village, right? 222 people who voted, but still it was 100% in some region. So that gives a new light, and I'm really happy, of course. It's not a win. It's just a small beginning. We're going to go into the hardest part. We're going to go into the part where people will start to feel threatened, like some governments on the way how they do things. Since 20, 30 years, I've been building surveillance tools, and suddenly now this is not going to be socially accepted anymore. Companies have been building a surveillance system and participating into this. So the number of people who will feel threatened, there will be a number of people who feel threatened by this, and it will show. And they will start to fight. Until now, it was just people talking on one side. Now there is actually something happening. So I'm really bullish in all the issue that is happening in cryptography and in the privacy-friendly technologies, because this is what would allow us to protect ourselves in there and to make our right to digital integrity be respected. And what is great about it, where I'm also very bullish, is that this is where a lot of innovation happens, because if you're in control of your data, actually, you're much more innovative. So this is the way we're going to fight against these, the ones who want to have this dystopia where all the data is freely available.
Right. And we're going to live in a transparent society where the legal system would have to provide protection and anonymity for people to safeguard this digital integrity, as we talk about. And this is what, and then we work on building privacy into the core of our infrastructure. So on a network like the internet, which is a tool that was supposed to be used for freedom, we want to establish a fully private conversation. And that's something that the name can achieve. So there will be a lot of evolution to come very soon. And I think this victory in Geneva marks a historical point in time in terms of data protection laws. And it will be really interesting to see how this evolves in the future. I think I'll wrap up the space now, and thank you so much for joining. I want to tell everyone, if you have any questions that you would like us to look at maybe later or just comment, please write them under the post of announcing this on the Twitter. I'll take a look at it and maybe ask Alexis to answer some of them if it's worth it. Please let us know your thoughts on all of this and how do you see it evolving in the future. This Spaces was also recorded, so you're free to listen to it again, and we'll keep sharing it. And thank you so much for joining today, Alexis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.